coming out this Saturday in this cold weather. You know, most of us here are from Atlanta, but you brought the warmth and the love with you, so we really, really appreciate it. And we're so happy to be in this space. My name, for those of you that don't know me, is September Gray with September Gray Fine Art Gallery, located in Atlanta. And I'm also here with Patricia with Pigment International Magazine, which is based here in Chicago. So this is a collaborative effort, which has been amazing. It's our first time working together, and this has truly been an exceptional show. And I'm honored to be here in this space. We're here until March the 1st, so please tell others, bring them out, share what you see, what you know, share this artist talk so that people will know we're here and that we'll be back hopefully in this space again sometime at some point. The title of the show is Decadence of Another Kind. Which talks about the work being decadent, which normally when you hear the term, it's referring to things that are over the top or indulgent, but this is what they do in the art space, in their space of being indulgent, telling our stories of survival, of joy, of family, just of life, which is something that happens no matter where you live. We're from the South. This could happen south of the border. This could happen in Asia. This could happen in France. This could happen in Brazil. This could happen. Our artist Basil Watson, who's from Jamaica, in Jamaica, this is about life and how we all experience life. And I think you have to have these artists talk. So to collect the work, you have to appreciate the work and understand what's going on. So 5 of the artists are here. 6 of the artists are here to talk about the work and give you a little snapshot, if you will, because we don't want to stay here. We could stay here all night and talk about the work, but at least tell you about their work, why they did the work they do, how they're influenced, and just give you a little snippet of why they're doing this work and how important it is to do this work. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit, Pat, about Pigment or say anything before we get started, and we'll start the conversation.
Sure. Again, I'm so appreciative of September being here. About Pigment International, we'll be 6 years old this year. And our whole goal was to tell the stories of artists, collectors, curators, the whole Black art ecosystem. We produced 4 magazines. 3 of them have won awards for their cover design. If you're interested in purchasing one, Phyllis is right by the elevator, and we would love for you to get them. We do a newsletter every week, so tomorrow's newsletter, every Sunday we do one, and it will have pictures from our opening last night, so you can also sign up so you can get that newsletter. Again, I can't say how appreciative I am of both the center, the Bridgeport Art Center. One of my dear work colleagues for more than 20 years is here at Bridgeport, and we began a conversation a couple of years ago about what we could do here. And then when September came along, it was pretty much a no-brainer to do this. So we're very happy to be here. And just any questions you have, well, I'm just excited to be here. Please note that we're sitting in front of Mr. Schofield's work. So when you capture it, he's the bashful one of the group, so I'm always trying to call him out. But we're sitting in front of some of his beautiful work. So as you capture pictures, make sure you tag all these wonderful artists in your post, and so we can get that and share it around.
So thank you again for being my partner, Pat. I really appreciate it. And again, the work is about the celebration of life and our stories and the human condition. But what I want each artist is to start talking about their background, how they started, and their influence. And we're going to start alphabetically with Kevin Cole. He's an abstract expressionist artist. He also does mixed media. His sculptural work is behind you on the back. To the left, he has sculptural pieces in aluminum and wood and several other pieces around the gallery. But here from Atlanta, and Kevin Cole, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, again, like September said, I want to thank everybody for coming out. But I want to introduce a few people. Matter of fact, it's rare you have one of your professionals from graduate school, to David Bauer and his wife Denise, and one of my collectors, Dr. Cynthia Armstrong, who is buying chemicals. And I'm quick, she quick to tell you I was buying chemicals a long time ago. How I became an artist is I've always had a speech impediment. So my mom would tell me anytime I came home and had a bad day, go make mama a picture. So I made my mother a lot of pictures. I did my undergrad at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. I have a master's in art education at the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana, a master of fine arts in drawing from Northern Illinois University. I taught 32 years, high school, college. My work, I always say, has stemmed around 4 or 5 issues. Number one, a story that my grandfather shared with me. Number two, three things have changed our lives forever. Hurricane Katrina, September 11th, and now COVID-19.
Yeah.
When I graduated from high school, I didn't want to go rest the vote. My grandfather, he took me to a tree where African Americans were lynched by their neckties on their way to vote. So that's why you see the necktie images appear a lot in my work. And when you talk about Hurricane Katrina, I had a lot of frat brothers who lived in New Orleans. I would travel back and forth. I started a series where I was mapping the path of the storm. And September 11th, I was supposed to be in New York on September 11th. The day before, I decided not to go. A friend of mine by the name of Bill Stevens, he sent me a photograph of a little boy holding a piece of tar paper and aluminum. So I started working on tar paper and aluminum as my protest against September 11th.
Wow.
So if you notice, all my pieces have titles that are positive titles. Even though we experienced the idea of African Americans being lynched, the titles I have to do with having faith, dreams, and things of that nature. And my last exhibition was in Atlanta entitled Where We Go From Here. It was about a gerrymandering where the black votes are suppressed. And in learning about how the black votes are suppressed, I asked my friends to ask their parents what were some of the things that they experienced in trying to vote. And one lady said that she was asked how many bubbles in a bar of soap. Okay, and this is documentation. If you ever go to Alabama at the Montgomery, the Legacy Museum, back in the old days, the ballot boxes looked like mailboxes, and it was ironic that an African American man, he was the one that designed the mailbox. So I asked this lady. She told me that she was asked how many black-eyed peas in the bag. But the one that really stayed on my mind was one in Florida. That was a lady said that anytime that there was any election that happened, the first day there would be a series of cross burnings. The second day, a series of nooses hanging around the polls, and the third day, it would say, "You best not be hanging around here to vote." So Forbes magazine last year did an article on the show. The show is going to the Temple Museum in April. In June, it's going to the Waco Museum, and in the fall, I'll be having a retrospective that's going to start at the University of Maryland. Thank you.
Kevin O'Keefe, you're next.
All right. Thank everyone for coming. My name's Kevin O'Keefe. I'm in my hometown. I'm from Chicago. Born and raised. Went to Proviso East High School here.
All right.
Got my start from graffiti. I was one of the little kids spray painting all your wonderful property around Chicago. Got arrested a couple times, starting at age 13. Decided it's funner painting on the easel. I can relax. Start kind of homing in on my craft. I still kind of use some of the techniques I use with graffiti, so my color palette is probably a little different from what you may see from traditional artists. Probably a little bit more bolder with my colors. Some of the colors are more muted. You look at fine art master paintings. You know, I'm trying to bring us to the new age. We have more materials to use, different pigments we can use in the art. I try to incorporate that and just take advantage of all the technology we have nowadays, but still kind of keep the substance that we had of the old masters and their diligence to their craft. So fame, glory, magazines, Facebook likes, they should mean more to me, but I'm just truly an artist. You know, I don't care about trying to make $1 from art, even though I'm blessed to be able to make a living from doing art. but it's more so trying to create a respect level, a new image of us, you know, something that you're not normally seeing. Art, I started out doing more imitating artists like most artists do. Ernie Barnes, you know, all the masters. Was lucky to get mentored when I came to Atlanta early in my career by a big artist. He's also from Chicago named Kevin A. Williams. Wack, known as Wack here. Gave me some excellent pointers. He was actually the first one to tell me I should go into doing landscapes with my style. So I was known for like doing a palette knife style, abstract, impressionistic type work. And I switched over to landscapes, not even switched, but it was more of a natural transition from where I moved to I wanted. God took me on a magical journey for the last 5 years, and I couldn't understand why I'm on this path. Lived in DC for the last 2 years. I went from DC to Williston, South Carolina, middle of the country. I'm like, why am I here? I'm a Chicago city boy, you know, and I live right next to a prize horse stable. I'm around lakes, the nature reserve, and I just studied the nature. Even where I live in Atlanta, across right from me is a lake in the middle of the city. It's like the best kept secret. And I just naturally studied that stuff. I didn't realize I was out there. I thought I was just relaxing. But as an artist mind, you know, we're always absorbing our environments, you know. So when I started painting, I didn't need to look at images anymore. You know, when I started using like what Mayhew said, you know, he creates mindscapes. It all comes from his imagination, and that way I'm not limiting myself on what I can do here. There's a tree here. It's more so a feeling that I'm trying to communicate. For me, my landscapes are almost escapism. You know, it gives a viewer a place to go and invites you in, somewhere warm and safe. And you know, everybody I notice who actually collects my work, you know, I see them the first time I meet them, they might be intrigued by the work, they like it. But once they actually have it on the wall and I meet them again, it's like they're almost family again. It's like a part of me is in them, you know, and it's a different type of relationship that we have, and the people that you get to meet on this journey, I'm honored to be with all these artists here. I just took it all in last night. I read the post that someone shared on Facebook, and I just read the names. I used to always just admire the artists. To be sitting on with these caliber artists is a true honor here. So my work is evolving, it's alive. I'm always growing, I'm always experimenting. I got some things I'm working on I can't tell you about right now. But I got a wonderful space. I've been blessed on a level that, I don't know, should I call it favor, or I don't know what it is, but I got a wonderful space for creating art, and I'm just dedicating, you know, the rest of my life really to it. You know, it's just, for me, it's no other option. You know, I didn't paint for 3 years straight. September knows that she was very angry with me. But I couldn't, my right shoulder was always sore. Standing up was sore, and I didn't realize I had a lung infection for like a while. And you know, I started working on more so health and just getting back all the way 100% so I can be 100% when I'm in the studio. And once everything happened, it's just all the doors opened up and inspiration came back, and I'm sitting with you all here right now.
Amen. And I forgot to point out his work is the landscape piece right in the middle, because I didn't point that out. So as you can see, it's beautiful. You see the palette knife and texture. And again, he's been compared a lot to Richard Mayhew, which is an honor to me for that comparison. So thank you again. Thank you. And next we have, I believe, Preston Sampson.
Okay, all right. Hello, Preston Sampson. I'm originally from West Palm Beach, Florida, Florida boy.
I'm sorry, let me point out your work, just so you're familiar. These pieces here, the figurative pieces, are beautiful. People just experiencing Black joy and looking absolutely wonderful. It's Preston's work.
All model after September grade. But anyway, I'm a Florida boy, and I would say that I came to University of Maryland, and I also think I had the unintended consequence of studying under two of the inarguably, two of the greatest African American figures, David Driscoll and Sam Gilliam. And it was, I think, often both of those artists informed my journey in two different ways. One, I would say, with Dr. Driscoll from the thing I took from him was functional ethos. Is how do you use your work to elevate other things, the simplest of objects, you know, how do you, so I tend to work on, I'm a medium person, I work on multiple mediums. I'm a painter by trade, but I'm a printmaker, I'm a paper maker, I'm a found object guy, I paint on wood, aluminum, whatever. I've always just used, you know, the material that was close to me. And that was also growing up as a kid, being poor like almost all of us. You know, you painted with what you had, you know, and so it was me making little ships out of the miniature coconut shells, you know. But I would think, you know, the narrative and the storytelling is where is my intent with my work all the time, you know, is to tell a story. I'm a historian. I love history, I love color, I love my people. So out of all of the convolution of all of these things is what I try to do. If there was one word, we talked about this a little last night in the synopsis, if there's one word I would have to say that I would want people to come away from my work with, was maybe a great understanding of something that they didn't quite know before, and that dignity, class, and poise of who we are as a people, in spite, in the face of fearful odds and the things that we've all collectively been through. And the other thing about it too is as an African American man, that's my focus. But I think we as African Americans are truly entrenched in the American experience. I mean, we're no different than the Irish. It's a totality of who we are as people, how we've all ascended from steel workers, you know, people with uniforms on, which is something I've always, you know, with my workman series and all. But now it's, even in some of the works here, it's how the spirits from the past, the things propel all of us. The fact that we're sitting here now in an art gallery surrounded by tremendous, I mean, unbelievable talent and beautiful. All of these people, I mean, men and women, you know, here on this panel, I mean, phenomenal artists. Something created them, but it wasn't, they didn't make themselves. It were those people in the background. It was things, history, and spirits and other things that has propelled all of us forward, propel you forward. And I'm determined to not let people forget. You know, like the Jews say, lest we forget. I say, same with me. You know, I say, and sometimes people will say, oh, you always good with the past. I'm like, you can't be here without the past. So I'm very entrenched. I'm a colorist. I think of myself technique-wise as I always call myself a hybrid between, you know, I mentioned Sam Gilliam, which Kevin was very, you know, much in tune with, but abstract. I'm somewhat of an abstract artist from my own base, but with a figurative slant. So I think there are elements of both in my work. And so I would like for people to come away from my work with learning something, asking a question, or also understand and hopefully just to see the beauty of it. I mean, we're beautiful people. It's a beautiful crowd here. You know, I mean, this is just, that's who we are. We aren't beat down. We aren't shot by the police. We aren't facing the dirt. You know, we're beautiful kings and queens and princes and princesses. That's what I want people to come away from looking at my work.
Amen.
Thank you, September.
Thank you so much. Next, because I got out of order, we have the beautiful Eleanor Neal to talk about her work. And Eleanor's work is to the left. The beautiful pieces over here, very surreal and just abstract, and you can feel the spirits coming through, whimsical. So tell us about your amazing work, Eleanor Neal.
Thank you, September Gray, and thank you for giving us this wonderful opportunity to be here. I have a background. I came from the Midwest, as we talked about before. I'm from Gary, Indiana, and as a little girl, my mom and my family used to take me to the museums here in Chicago. The Museum of Science and Industry, the Art Institute and whatnot, so I was always inspired by art. Fast forward, I went to Indiana University, and I have 2 degrees from Indiana University. And then eventually I moved south. When I moved south, I moved to Atlanta, And eventually I found an interest in learning more about the people of the South, being that I was from the Midwest. Eventually I went to the Art Institute of Chicago and got my MFA. While there, I learned the story of Julie Dash and Daughters of the Dust. I spent time watching the film, reading the book, and interesting enough, I began to explore and think about the Georgia Sea Islands, the Gullah area, and the stories there. So during the summer and certain times of the year, I started making travels to the Georgia Sea Islands. And I was so intrigued with Savannah, Cumberland Island, Ossabaw. And so eventually I began to really take my time and look at, along with visiting the stories of what was going on there. It was like magical places, right? And I began to hear the voice of one of my mentors, who was John T. Scott, who always said, really take in, find the objects of nature that are around you, and go in your studio and create art around it, right? And so another mentor of mine, Larry Walker, also talked about how to use materials to create your stories. So as I began to move through this place, I began to visualize and see the story of the Nana. The Nana was the gatekeeper. The Nana was the mother, the grandmother, the person who held all the family and community together on the island there. And she was the Gullah. And so she would sit in the middle of the forest on this big stump right there, tree stump. And she would actually talk to the women and men around her and say, we are a family. We are a community. And eventually some of you will leave this community and some of you will stay. And basically you will make the decision whether you go or stay. So as time moved on, and as she sat there and talked, she took these stones, she took these bones, and she wrapped them up really tight in this fabric with this Spanish moss and threading. And then she buried it into the earth. And then I began to think about the power that she was creating, the spiritual power from this story, right? And burying it into the earth. So then I began to look at the Spanish moss around me. And I began to really look at the trees and the movement of the moss as it blowed in the wind. And then I began to really think about, take these materials from nature and see where it takes you in your story. How do you speak about women empowerment? How do you speak about community? How do you speak about nature? How do you speak about birth and death through the natural materials here? So I began to look at 3 different processes. I work with beeswax and create monotypes with actual beeswax. So that's one layering of my work. I also create these interesting ink drawings whereby I lay the big paper out or I lay the canvas out and I actually immerse my body into the drawings. So I take the moss, I take the ink, and I really push into it to create the mark making. And for me, that tells a story of chaos, struggle, empowerment, peace and confinement. It just reaches all those different emotions as I'm creating the works. And then recently I spent time in Defusky Island. Defusky Island is a beautiful island that exists right outside of Hilton Head. And I take the ferry over, spend time on the island, and take in the beauty of the island and keep in contact with the storyteller. So she takes me to the cemetery. She takes me to the little houses where a lot of the Gullah people still live and own their land. Even the young people who have left the island, they still have the family land. And that meant a lot to me because again, fast forward, it's talking about community, right? Talking about the empowerment of community. So I took Spanish moss, I took plants back and put them in my car there and drove back to Atlanta and went into my studio, laid everything out, and just sit quietly with those natural materials, and how do I move forward and create my stories with these materials from those specific places. And so that's the story, a little background of where I come from in terms of how do I connect the abstraction with where I am today and the past, and how I use materials to go into it to create the artworks as well.
Your lovely mother that helped introduce you to the arts world. She's here.
And her lovely friends, as well as one of my instructors back there from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, Mr. Michael Ryan.
And I have to mention, I love how things work when you don't plan it. Eleanor had a show in Atlanta in the spring. In March was Women's History Month. And we had planned to have the show earlier, and it got pushed back, and I was like, okay, it'll just happen when it happens. Well, ironically, I had never heard of Defusky Island, so I was really intrigued. She's telling me about the people there and the lifestyle, and I'm like, okay, I need to go to this place, it sounds amazing. And that month in Town and Country magazine, there was an article. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Arthur Ashe, the famous tennis player, but his wife was a famous photographer. And they did an issue that same month as Eleanor's show talking about her going to Defusky Island to actually photograph the people and be in their presence, not just to hear about it, to actually be in their presence. And I'm like, Eleanor, this came out, you know, the opening of your show, this is perfect. So, you know, it's just how the spirit leads sometimes. When things are supposed to happen, they happen when they're supposed to. And I thought that was so beautiful. And the work is stunning. So thank you again for being here. Just beautiful work, and make sure you go around the corner to see more of her works. It's extraordinary. Next we have Mr. Michael Schofield, and I'll point out this beautiful abstract red piece is one of Michael's works, so we have the honor of sitting in front of his work. So Michael Schofield, thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Michael Schofield. I'm originally from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Attended Fisk University, undergrad, and while there I worked very closely as an undergrad with Dr. Driscoll and Martin Puryear.
Wow.
And after graduation, I moved back to Chattanooga, stayed there for a while, and decided to come to Atlanta. And when I got here, I taught public school for a while, but I wanted to do a little bit more. My hope was to become a tenured professor. That didn't materialize, but you know, I'm still an artist. As a graduate student at Georgia State, I was fortunate enough, like Eleanor, to work with Larry Walker. I learned a great deal from Larry Walker. Great deal about creating art. But to understand my art and where I'm coming from with it, I hearken back to a quote by Nina Simone, which suggests that an artist should always reflect the times in which they live. And as such, I've tried to do that because historically there have been incidents that have taken place that highlights man's inhumanity to man. Francisco Goya's 3rd of May. When Napoleon conquered Spain, he set his brother up as dictator. And the people willingly sacrificed their lives in order to become free.
Fantastic.
You know, that's just one instance. Then another instance, and all of these paintings, I have a historical knowledge of them because I studied them in undergrad. Picasso's Guernica,
Yes.
where Francisco Franco enlisted the services of the Luftwaffe to bomb his own people, just so he could rule. And all of these things stuck in my mind. And then relating to things that are happening today with the criminal justice system, Ben Sean created a piece called The Passion of Sacco and Vanzetti, who were railroaded and convicted of a crime that suggested they had no credible evidence, and they were executed. And all of that stuck with me through all of these years. So when I started to experience some of the things that were taking place in our society, police brutality, black men being sent to prison under circumstantial evidence, mass shootings, I decided that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to paint about the times in which I am living. You know, but more than that, I think process and composition is just as important. You can paint about these times, but if your process and composition doesn't reach the level that you would like, then it's very difficult to arrive at a successful work of art. I took a page out of history where Jackson Pollock took the canvas off the easel and he laid it out on the floor. For the 20th century, that was groundbreaking. No one ever did that. And he created some very beautiful, intricate paintings from that. And I wanted to use that technique to create my work by taking the canvas off the easel and putting it on the floor. And one of the techniques I use is I pour, and I work in large scale, as you can see. I pour paint all over the surface, and then I wash the paint with a garden hose, where the water from the hose reaches a certain height and then comes down and disperses the painting. When the painting dries, I have no control over its drying process, but when the painting dries, it creates these beautiful, intricate, delicate tributaries. And when I reach that point, I paint in and through the surface, and it gives me some incredible nuanced depths and textures. So if you would like, you could go around and look at the pieces, and I can explain it to you, or you can just view it for yourself, and hopefully you can get some enjoyment from it.
Don't forget the mark making.
That's where, beg your pardon?
Don't forget the mark making.
Oh, yes, definitely. Thank you. Mark making is very important too. There are so many things that artists do with their work that it would take volumes to really explain it. Some artists work, and I do this, work with sticks or a twig, and I'll put paint on the surface, and I'll scratch through it. Underneath there's a ground color that will show through, and it creates a beautiful, beautiful contrast between the surface and the paint that's underneath that. So I like to paint about what's going on around me, and last 8 or 10 years, my work has become extremely social, political, and spiritual. So feel free to ask any questions or view the art. I'd be happy to share that with you.
It's beautiful. Thank you. And last but definitely not least, we have Jamel Wright Sr., and he is amazing. He not only works in textile, but these are his pieces I'm showing now, the textile pieces that you see, which are incredible. It's just like royalty hanging on the walls, just the colors, the way they hang, absolutely stunning. So we will let Jamel Wright tell you about his work. And there's more pieces behind the wall as well, so make sure you go behind to see the other work.
Okay. I'm Jamel Wright Sr. I work for September Gray. I love September. I love September. She's amazing, and I'm so grateful. I am so incredibly grateful to be here, and so incredibly grateful to be in Chicago with all of you, to be back in the Midwest, my home, to have spent time with my cousin, who's super dope, has a restaurant here, and then to meet one of my people I've been fanning out about on Instagram, Brianna Bryan. So she's super dope, and I was gonna tell you about her. You know, check her out. I was born in Columbus, Ohio. I lived in Dayton, grew up in Cincinnati, and so I'm a Midwest boy. So the cold don't frighten me. But it is the reason why I left and moved to Atlanta.
Tell the truth.
But in all sincerity, my parents, I'm a product of the Great Migration, as many of us are in this room, where our parents have moved from the South to the North in hopes of opportunity and change, for different jobs, right? Even to just work as a portsman or to be a janitor was better than being lied to on a field, being lynched, right, for voting. They found other ways to do things to us in the North, but in the same way, we would go back and visit the South in the summertime, and I would go and visit my grandparents. My stepfather's mother lived in a town called Docena, Alabama. You have not heard of it. As a matter of fact, when I was 17 years old, there was finally a sign that on the way to the town, it says Docena 2. So, and it was a camp. It was called Camp Docena at first, and it was for coal mining. My mother is from a town called Riggins, Alabama. You haven't heard about that either. What's interesting about my mother and my stepfather is they are 13 years apart, and they met in Columbus, Ohio, when my grandmother moved us up to Columbus, moved my mother up to Columbus when she was 14. So we would return to the South every summer, every spring, for family reunions or to go visit my grandmother. My grandmother, my stepfather's mother, who would have a, you know how they would say they had like a small garden, but it equated to now, it would be like a farm. It was like 4 or 5 rows of corn. It would have 4 or 5 pecan trees in the backyard, or pecan trees, sorry. Too much restaurants, pecan trees. So we had pecan trees in the back. There was tomatoes and peppers and collard greens, of course, right? So she would have all that laid out, and she would make the best cakes. I mean, they were magical. And she had 12 children. So she would make a cake after every meal. So we have a chocolate cake or a caramel cake. I've never met anyone that can match a caramel cake. She would coconut cake every day, right? But that house was really interesting. It was really amazing to me. It was a lot of my childhood was at that house that we would spend every summer there. And I would sit on that front stoop, and I would, so I was told as a little boy, like, you know, we have to do grown folks talk. Go out there and paint count those train cars coming down the road, right? So I would go out there and count, like, oh, I got 99. They're like, good, go back out there and count some more, right? Because they wanted to do grown folks talking. So I would go out there and paint, count those cars. And as I counted those cars, I would start seeing the houses that were in front of where the train track was. I would see the trees behind that and the sunset behind that. And my mother was a photographer. So she taught me how to see through the little view. So I would be able to see the train go behind the trees, in front, behind the houses, in front of the trees, and against the sunset. I tell you that because that is the first acknowledgement of abstraction for me. And that is how I began to see everything. So I used to get in trouble, as my mother being a photographer, for taking pictures of the sunset, because film used to cost. So why you wasting my film? Put people in front of it. Jamel, what's this? Oh, I like the birds. Jamel, don't take pictures of birds. The film cost. So I was always into seeing nature and reflecting nature. So what do I paint about? I have an interesting story where I went through college, started college at 32. I graduated at 45 with an art history from Georgia State in African American contemporary art with a minor African American studies. I then, at 45 years old, moved. Although I had 4 children at home, I moved to New York to be there for 2 years to get my master's at School of Visual Arts. People ask me, how were you able to leave your children back home? It was really hard for me, but their mothers already hated me anyway, so they couldn't hate me anymore. So I figured I might as well just go to New York, do my 2 years, and come back. So I was in New York for 2 years, and I did not get to study under some of the illustrious people that you study under, that I've read about and studied about. I did study with Michelin Thomas. I did study with Miguel Luciano, Dave McKenzie, Rico Gaston. Those are some of my peers. Dred Scott, who is from Chicago as well, graduated from our institute. And while in New York, I began dealing with textile. Back up, quick story. My daughters had made me watch Project Runway with them. So as I watched Project Runway, I used to work in wood, and I got interested in the way that the textile moved. I got interested in, like, when they did pattern exercises, that pattern, when it would move back and forth, the pattern would break, right? So the pattern would almost become distressed. It would come in full, then break up. And I got interested in that pattern breaking. So I wanted to try that when I went to grad school, and I began painting on canvas and draping that canvas, painting layers. And then I started wanting to add something that I felt told the American and the African American story. So I began using this Dutch wax cloth, thinking it was an African fabric. What I found out was that it was not an African fabric. It actually was made in Holland. And I found that to be, at first, you kind of, well, that's disturbing, because you grow up thinking that it's dashiki and you think that it's these African things, and it's actually none of that. But then I started understanding it in a different way and started thinking it's a Dutch wax fabric. So in the same way that they claim that I'm from Africa, I'm not really from Africa. It's no disrespect. It's just my grandparents were born my grandma was born in Montgomery, Alabama. My grandfather was in Muncie, Indiana. So that's Memphis. So that's where my people come from. I'm not from Africa. Am I American? I don't know. I look on the news and I really don't always feel American when I see young black men or old black men being murdered by police officers and there's really no justice. So I find myself, just like this fabric, being in between. So I don't really want to talk about all of that stuff. Us talk about joy and happiness, and the fact that when I was sitting on that front porch, I'd rather talk about how we lived in spite of, how we are happy in spite of. Like Toni Morrison said, there are enough stories within the black community that I don't have to tell anybody else's stories. I can just talk about being me. So that's why in my paintings, I almost see them like amulets. I see them as power items, right? Like the Nikisi pieces of the Congo. They're almost like that, where those pouches are filled with clothes of my family, my children, my parents, myself. So they have that good feeling, right? I keep them in my studio and I smoke cigars around because I love smoking a cigar. It's one of my favorite things in the whole wide world. Smoking cigars and painting are two of my favorite things. There's a third one. So I love, so I include my family in these works, right? But also adding the fabric and draping the fabric is to allude to this relationship that we have not only to textiles and not only to, but also to each other and our movement, right? Moving from the south to the north in hopes of change. And then draping it, right? In this beautiful way that it's draped. I recycle all of the parts. When you look at the orange one, you'll see tiny knots. Those come from the scraps that I would get from a dressmaker. And I would start tying those up in knots. So I reuse everything. Even the canvas that's behind it, to keep it so it stays that way, I cut away that canvas from it and I sew that together, and then I make different paintings from those. Those pouches and the loops, they are connected to the gris-gris bags of African Americans. When they moved from the south to the north, they had these small little pouches. Muddy Waters says, I got a Johnny Cockaroo, I want to mess with you, right? Because he filled this small bag with like a rabbit's foot or amulet and kept it in his pocket so he had good luck. So I want these items to feel like good luck charms, right? Listen to a lot of Prince around them, have great conversations. Even all of us sitting around them having great conversations. All that, I believe, is going into the work. So when it's in your home and you walk past it, you feel good. It brings that power back into your household, right? It brings that energy back.
I totally agree. I think art is a conversation that never ends. But before we move forward, I know, Pat, you would like to ask some questions. I want to talk about abstraction. Most people don't understand abstraction. It's confusing because they're not seeing a figure or an apple, an orange, or a person in the piece. So I wanted you and Michael and anyone can chime in on abstraction. I want to read my definition when I look at abstract work because I love abstraction and it's a huge part of my collection. I say abstraction is truly a free form and a free way of thinking, giving artists an inspirational voice to tell their stories in a diverse way on their own terms. Unlike figurative art, which allows for only one story at a time, abstraction is akin to an epic novel that unfolds with each viewing. This mirrors the abstract nature of our lives, which cannot be confined to a single definition. That's how I feel. It's just always unfolding, and every time I look at a piece, I see something new and different. And it's like jazz, when they improvise, you're getting something different every time. It's not the same melody, but I would like you to explain or give your definition when you're working in abstraction, because most people often don't understand it. And if you want to start off, Michael, that would be awesome.
Well, abstraction is an American origination from the New York School. And there was this group of powerful, very good abstract artists in New York during the 50s that started this movement that became so popular that it moved the center of art from Paris to New York, and it's been in New York ever since. But the one element of abstraction that they focused on was the spirituality of abstraction. The spirituality meaning man's connection to those things around him, and the spiritual element that we call the creator. As I'm creating my work, I listen to a lot of jazz, and jazz for me, straight ahead jazz for me, is a strong influence. John Coltrane created a CD or an album called Spiritual. And I was in my studio working, painting, and I decided to read the liner notes. And I had been feeling this way all along, but when I read the liner notes, I found that he was dedicating his work to God, and I'm like, wow, I'm not the only one that feels this way. But when he started to do that, his style changed, and people felt that he was abandoning the type of music that made him renowned. But over the years, people, the listeners, began to listen more closely to his work. And today, John Coltrane is probably the most brilliant composer of jazz music. So when I create abstraction, I'm creating it from a point of spiritual and emotional awareness of my finite presence that exists in the universe. My philosophy is that we are all part of the universe. We are just a single cell in this vast universe. And our being, our creation, the fact that we were created from dark matter, from stars, suggests there must be a higher power. So when I approach my work from that perspective, but I imbue it with my personal experiences. So I try to combine the spiritual aspect of my work with the experiential aspects of things that go on around me. So hopefully that'll give you some insight as to where I'm coming from when I paint.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Did anyone want to elaborate?
Yeah, I think that, but I think if you look at history, you know, abstraction, there were a lot of African American artists like Harold Woodruff, Larry Potter. They were doing abstract work, but they were in the South. But unfortunately, they were not in New York. So abstraction goes back a little bit farther than a lot of people want to see, because as African American artists, if you are abstract, I think you walk in and out of two worlds, one black and one white.
Right.
So you have to look at the history and in between, and you have to look at the history of black abstract artists. They were dealing with instead of dealing with the human figure, they were dealing with how they feel and the things that were going on around them. So then you take it a step further, you got a group called Afro-Cobra, African Community of Bad Relevant Artists. They took it to another step where they started to deal with images about the family, how important the black family is. Then you look at now abstraction in terms of some of your top and highest paid artists in New York are African American artists who got their MFA from Yale.
Yeah.
So with that part of it, we got to look at the totality of abstraction and the blues, okay? Because what we were experiencing the blues and singing about the blues, but it was a black experience. And I always tell the story that B.B. King got his start at my grandmother's club. When the reason he named his guitar Lucille, the lady who started the fight, her name was Lucille. So that all happened at my grandmother's club.
Where was your grandmother's club?
Mariah's Place in Twist, Arkansas.
Twist, Arkansas.
Twist, Arkansas.
Yeah, but the original concept of that abstraction completely disavowed any figurative elements whatsoever. It was pure color and pure emotion. Abstraction that projected the emotional of the creator, the emotional content or aspects of the creator, completely devoid of any figuration.
The thing is like, I believe that a lot of us think that we don't really understand abstraction,
Right.
but you really do. You really understand abstraction a lot more than you think you do. You recognize the figure because it resembles you, but you understand abstraction because it's on the inner of you. So like the figurization where you see the mouth and the eyes, you go, oh, that looks good. That looks like me, right? But if you stand in front of abstraction long enough, give yourself a moment to feel it. Then it is your psychology, right? Especially with black, I practice something I call black abstraction. And I've slightly taken it away from just it being an abstraction that has to deal with the New York school. Not because I disavow the New York school, because I mean, Cy Twombly and Pollock and Rothko. I mean, those are people that I reference. But at the same time, when we deal with being black in America, that's something that's very unique, right? It's not like anything else that's ever been seen in the world. The fact that we migrated from the south to the north, the fact that we are put in a place where we didn't know where we were gonna go, right? The fact that we put okra in our braids, the fact that we put rice in our pockets to find a place to go somewhere we've never been before. I mean, that's like the same guy who traveled to Antarctica. I mean, like, you don't know what's gonna happen. And that's what abstraction is. It's going into that space where you don't know what's gonna happen, knowing that when you get there, you're gonna reach a promised land, right? It's knowing that you're gonna be in that space that's gonna be beautiful, right? So let's take some contemporary ideas of abstraction. Abstraction, if we can go all the way back to the 1880s with J.W.M. Turner, when he began splattering using seascapes, right? Then you take that with Bannister, Edward Bannister, who was using landscapes, right? With gesture, right? And then we go into the New York school, right? And they were painting on the floor because of taking away the id and becoming childlike and primitive and painting like the indigenous people did. And then you have jazz music, right? But what is it about jazz music? It's the improvisation. Improvisation allows you to explore outside the realm of something that is figurative, which is the voice that says the words that you recognize, right? So jazz takes away the music, and then they begin to expound upon that. Okay, so then what comes next? Hip hop. And that's why I add spray paint into my work. And that's why I add, when the pieces are together, you think of it as quilting, but it's not quilt. I call it sampling, right? Just how hip hop has sampled old music and made it contemporary. So you see it as quilting because that's old. I'm taking something and quilting it, making it new, call it sampling, right? I'll tell you even a better reference of contemporary abstraction in music is Andre 3000's last album.
Oh, yeah.
His last album. And the reason why I say that is because he's removed the words and just put the music. He's improvisating on hip hop. He's now using his breath to improv on the flute and taking away the words. So abstraction is still coming. You recognize it when you hear it. So don't be afraid of it. It's right there. It's in you.
I like the reference that you brought with music. I played the trumpet as a kid, and then I think you learn something from playing the instrument that you can relate to art.
Yeah.
So you learn how to use your natural instincts. You know, you learn not to think. When I play the guitar now, when I was trying to play the guitar, I'm trying to learn the chords, G chord, C chord, all this stuff. And when you try to think about it, you mess up every time. Once you finally learn the technique, like I probably read a bit more about art than I looked at pictures. I read about how Michelangelo created his paintings, how he put the gold leaf under them to create the illumination, and you know, abstract art is super sophistication. Artists doesn't mimic, you know, they take something and they interpret what they see. So if you take a painting, and just like John Coltrane with Miles Davis, he would play in a way where the notes would skip. You know, it's almost like just not hitting all the way. Just my painting, I incorporate that the same way into my art. You know, subtle nuances that you want to add into your work. Abstract gives me the ability personally to invite something greater than myself into the work. I don't like being in control of my work. I could paint, yeah, I wish you could see the paintings before they're almost done. They look okay. But it's something right at the end, something else steps in, it might be a color that just drops on the floor. I'm like, I appreciate that, thank you. You know, it might be something I scrape off and it's just perfect, you know. So abstract, you know, gives you the ability to invite something in, but it also has to let the viewer come in as well. You know, like you said yesterday, you know, you make them bring something to the table.
Right.
You know, I want the viewer to participate, you know, in it, you know. It plays on your subconscious mind, you know, and that's what it does. And the subconscious is conscious. You know, you might look at something, you might not know why you like it, you might not even know the meaning of it, but when you hear the story, then you can relate to it. Yeah. There's something in your subconscious mind that kind of helps you understand it. So I appreciate that.
I just wanted to add, I'm hearing all the male names in abstraction, but I just want to say something to the women of abstraction.
Say it, say it, say it. Helen Frankenthaler, let's talk about it.
Yes. When I think of Jackson Pollock, well, what about Lee Price?
Right, yes.
When I think of Julie Maher too, right?
Yeah.
Right.
When I think of Mildred Thompson.
Right.
When I think of all the, and Helen Frankenthaler,
Yeah.
all the women
Preach,
artists
Thomas.
in the world
Thomas.
of abstraction who are an important part of
Adina
this
Pindella.
world.
Yes.
And we cannot forget the women
No.
of abstraction. I think that's
No.
really
That's
important.
No.
And when you look at
And
the
forgive
work,
me.
you don't see male, female.
Right.
You see the abstraction.
Right.
So I just wanted to bring that up because I'm
Agnes
hearing
Martin.
all these male names.
I was thinking about
but-
Agnes Martin when you were talking about your work.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
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 But
Good
I'm
meditative.
inspired by a
Yeah.
lot of women in
Yeah.
abstraction artists.
Yeah.
Thank
Yes. Thank you.
And I want to add something to this
Uh-huh.
because the outlier here, the figurative guy. What I say, I was kind of trained in the abstract school, you know, and even my work this still is based in abstraction, even though I was listening to you talk about the poor. I do a different kind of medium, it's pulp painting. It's all flat, you know. Is you pouring paint, moving it around. It's very serendipitous. You don't know what you're gonna get. It's a surprise, you know, every time. There was a point I looked at my paintings, like the ones that are really washy with the lines, is cloud paintings. You know, it's like they start with like the baseline washes, and then I see something in there and be like, maybe it may make no sense whatsoever at all. You know, it's not meant to be a pictorial description, but as it goes on, it starts to take on forms of figures, faces, whatever it is that I see that's happening. But now, the part I want to talk about abstract is there are things in subconscious, like you said, the subconscious. You don't know what you're doing. I mean, everybody here is pretty much a witch. You know, they all have a power over using
A mystic. A mystic.
Mystic, there you agree, or whatever you want to call it. But you know what? There's a way that you move and do your work, and you don't know what you're doing. I mean, it's a very subconscious thing. I mean, when other people see my work, who are familiar with me, they'll see things, and I'm like, huh? I didn't, you know, that's not what I was going at, but there's always multiple layers of things going on, it's seen and unseen. I really believe in the spirit world, and I think there are things that are always there, that are underneath, that happen. I'm like, oh, wow, and I think, personally for me, even for myself, as the person who did the work, who knew where I was coming from, I thought I knew. 5 years later, there's something else. There's a corner of a thing, there's another thing that did something that I had no intention of doing, that it happened, just like from the spirit world, it's beyond. And the last thing I'm gonna say about abstraction is, when my mother died in 2004, I did a whole series of abstracts. And some of the people I know say, oh, you're not an abstract artist, don't do that, whatever. You know, there was no way I could describe
Exactly.
how I felt
Exactly.
in a picture.
Right.
Did I want to draw a picture of my mother laying in a hospital
no.
bed? Did I want to do a procession of cat? No.
No.
It was pure raw feeling. And it was color, which I'm about colors, you know, contrast, blah, blah, pattern, all that stuff. But it was there, it was my raw self, which is still, or in my paintings, they continue, but it was devoid totally of pictorial reference, you know, or anything that anybody would recognize. But they were fantastic. And I want to trade in my figures for being abstract and challenge this guy. Probably not.
But no, but
you know, that's
Preston.
not me.
Hold on, go ahead, just let it go. You outnumbered.
I got nobody, anybody.
But Preston, like I would add that, like your pieces remind me of Gordon Parks photography.
Yeah.
Like that, the way that he was taking those figures and almost singular, making them very singular, and at the same time bringing an elegance to them. Like so, when I'm looking at the paintings, I was thinking they looked familiar to me, and I started. That's why I was looking at my phone, because I was thinking about who was it, and it's Gordon Parks. I really see a
It's
lot
Raymond
of.
Saunders more so than anybody, the West Coast painter,
Yeah.
who deals with the layers of what the figures are coming forward. If you look at the earlier Raymond Saunders, especially that piece
Yeah.
there, remind you directly of Raymond Saunders, how he's dealing with the picture plane, light colors against dark, push and pull.
Yeah, so even though we deal with abstraction, doesn't mean we don't like figurative.
Oh, no.
We just don't pay
because I like
attention to
figurative
it.
don't mean I don't. 70% of the work in my personal collection is abstract art. You know, I have a kind of soft spot for abstract, you know, but look, when I was in school with Sam, he told me, he said, the minute you put eyes in a painting, it's no longer art. And I said, well, man.
Hey, say it, Sam, say it. Say it, Sam.
But he didn't know I'd be taking some of his scraps and painting figures. How about this one? Man, I like the figure, you know. But anyway, yeah, I totally, you know, I think abstraction is, and what you all are doing with your work,
It's amazing.
it's lights out. And I just say this, I know I've said it over and over, but I'm really thrilled and honored to be up here with you all of y'all. These guys are fantastic.
Yeah.
If I had money, I'd buy all of them. September grade would lend me a bag real quick. Yeah, but that's all I got.
It's something I wanted to point out too. I want the audience to know. A couple of years ago, September mounted a show at Red Dot in Miami during Miami Art Week, and it's the largest time for art anywhere in the country. And she brought all of these artists there, for most of these artists there, and wanted to showcase abstraction. And what she did, so that people knew they were Black, she put their pictures up on there. She didn't just put their names and their, you know, what the work was. She put their pictures there. So, you know, and this is one thing that kind of led this to two, because I so admired how she was showing there's another side to Black art, and made sure that people knew these were Black artists. So she is fabulous. The other thing I want to point out, before you say this, because you brought this up, could I have Sherman Beck stand up? One of the 10 original members of Afro-Cobra
Where is it?
is in the audience.
And I'm also.
And he's my
I'm one of the newest members of Afro-Cobra now. Okay, but I want to say that there's a book that's out called Black Abstract Artists in the '80s who are now getting their due. It's called Something to Look Forward to. And so now Black abstract artists in the '80s, their prices are starting at close to $1 million. Norman Lewis is one of the highest paid. He was a lone Black abstract expressionist. He was. That they left out a lot of history. You got people like Sam Gilliam, who was one of my mentors. You got a number of Black abstract artists, but they're now in the '80s. And was something that was said by Betty Blayton. She said, "Now I can afford the steak, but I can't eat it." So she made that comment because now her works are selling for millions of dollars.
Well, like when Norman Lewis would be in photographs with the New York school, they would purposely like have him stand on the end and they would cut him out of the picture.
Wow.
Yeah, Norman Lewis was with the big dogs. He was,
Yeah.
like that whole New York school. All those guys were geniuses, man. They were geniuses.
I like to say pure abstraction
Say that.
has always been a problem for the viewer because it was so pure that it was very difficult for people to reach it. And Kevin just mentioned the word abstract expressionism. And after the initial abstract movement, abstract expressionism occurred, where a slight figurative element started to emerge in the art, and they named that abstract expressionism. So in a lot of abstraction, it's not pure abstraction today, it's abstract expressionism, because the figurative element has started to emerge, and it's even emerged in quite a few of my pieces. But I still consider myself an abstract artist because I tried to mask that figurative element where it would not be so obvious.
So there's an artist. His name is MacArthur Binion.
He's from Chicago.
Yeah. So his issue with abstraction was the fact that he actually was in minimalism, right? But his issue was that he was too Black to be minimalist, and too minimalist to be a Black artist.
Right.
So the thing, I say that about pure abstraction only because that's why I have created this idea about black abstraction. And the reason why is because even though we are working with something that's very pure, unfortunately, when it comes to being African American and doing abstraction, you almost have to justify yourself in abstraction. So we have to tell these narratives in addition to our abstraction, as opposed to just letting the painting be the painting, right? Where if you look at it like a Jackson Pollock, they're not asking him about his credentials. They're not asking about who taught him. They're not asking him like how he came up with that. They're not asking. It's art for the sake of making art. But when it comes to being African American, we almost have to justify. And part of it has to do with the fact that the idea about thinking, to make abstraction, you have to be a thinker. So that means that when our less melanated peers at times come to us, they're wondering how could we think through this process of painting that is higher thinking. Yes.
But at the same time, you have to look at who's showing them too. There was a gallery in Philadelphia. Her name was Sandy Webster. Sandy started showing black abstract artists. The white galleries told her, "Don't do it," or because white was not going to come to your gallery.
Well, Michael Roosevelt
And she
did the
did.
same thing.
She showed mainly black abstract artists.
Yeah.
So then, when you look at the establishment, where the money's coming from.
Well, no, and that's what. But
Right.
I'm adding to what you're saying
Yeah.
is that like oftentimes we're not considered qualified to make abstraction. But I mean, the abstraction's always been here in us and with us. So that's what makes it challenging. Oftentimes, I feel like for the black intellect, often to see abstraction, because they don't know which one is the good one, which one is the best one, which one should I buy, which one will profit me in the long term. And I just say, fill it out.
Well, I want to say this. The New York School artists were not always abstract artists. Most of them were modern and figurative artists.
Yes.
And I think Jackson Pollock's accident of throwing and splashing paint led to his discovery of putting the canvas on the floor, because he actually looked at the floor
Right.
in which he was painting in his studio. And one of the seminal art critics of the 20th century, Clement Greenberg,
Yes.
thought it was fresh and unique and new, and Jackson started to paint that way. And Greenberg made him a star. So
Yes.
art is accidental. A lot of art is accidental, particularly art that's outside of the normal canon. So I think abstraction, the artists that were the New York School artists that became abstract artists, they were searching for something, and Greenberg and Pollock discovered upon it, and everyone started to become abstract painters because
But I'm still saying there were black abstract artists in the artists in the South. They were doing the same thing, but they just didn't get the recognition. You look at Larry Potter.
At
you
what
look at
time? I'm not familiar with-
Well, you need to read, brother.
but see,
I'm saying there are
all of
other.
abstraction originated out of the New York School.
They're the one got the
African
recognition.
mass.
Yeah. That because they were in New York. Example.
But before the New York School, no one was doing abstraction. No one was doing abstraction.
There's a book. There's a book called 20th Century African American Art by David Driscoll, whom you studied with, right?
Yeah.
Have you read that? Okay,
but that was long after the New York School.
Go to Cedric Dover's book, African American Artists.
Yeah.
Just go to those books.
Yes.
And then you
I
see.
understand what you're saying, but what my point is, all abstraction originated out of the New York School, because before then,
The brothers just
art
said Africa,
was-
right? Africa, right? Abstract.
Yeah.
Okay.
well, African art isn't abstract. It's
Abstracted?
It's not pure abstraction. You can't.
It's not pure
It's not
abstraction
pure-
to the,
we're talking about
to the
pure
level that we
abstraction.
understand
It's just like
now.
Bill, less filling and tastes great. Let's move on.
Yeah, that can be an interesting debate. I'm surprised no one Googled it here. You would have any millennials Googling, but yeah, abstraction again, it's like abstraction, like art. It's subjective,
There
you
you
know,
go. There you go.
and there's
Like
different
music.
levels, like music, right? I love this debate though. This is wonderful because you have educators here. You know, Kevin taught for a long time. You taught, we have all these educators. Yeah,
National teacher of the year.
Eleanor, Professor Clark. So that's what happens when you have all these professors.
And to bring it back around, Justin Pollock took his style from a woman named Janet Soul.
Come on, talk to me.
So,
He Googled.
yeah,
Hey, Google.
Yes.
I love research.
Do you have any questions? I wanted to talk about abstraction.
Okay,
Yes.
Yeah, I have one, and I wanted to talk about community, because the one thing I've learned, and this is in education, this is like an art 101 we're getting here today, in trying to write about art, I look at the community that you guys form around yourselves. I look at you in the room like last night, and you congregate and you talk. How important is community and mentorship to you in developing your practices, sustaining your practices, and growing your
Okay,
practices?
to me it's very important. I did my undergrad at the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, which is the HBC.
Yeah.
I learned how my mentors, Terrence Corbin, Ernest Davidson, they became my mentors. So when I started teaching, I have a young man, I have 3 assistants. One assistant has been with me since he was in the 7th grade. When I did a 15-story mural for the Olympics, I made sure that they allowed me to hire my former students. So mentorship is like John T. Scott said, each one teach one. And I tell having those students, and Derek Phillips is his name, outstanding. He's 46 years old. Every major commission I've done, he's been with me on. I've got I think 46 public art commissions around the country, and Derek has worked with me on each one. And that's why to me, historically black colleges are so important.
Grambling State
I'm
University?
right. Arkansas part of the sweat. Okay, so
Atlanta.
Yes.
and then
Morris
being-
Brown College.
and then having being able to not only talk to them but David Bauer. You cut down on a lot of things when you ask when you ask your professor, should I show with this gallery? Should I not? Because it saves you a lot of time, because they most likely have gone through that.
I wanted to say that I had the wonderful opportunity to work with John T. Scott and Larry Walker, and Kevin Cole as well. He's been quite an inspiration to me as an art educator and as an artist. But I had the pleasure of spending time with Larry Walker, who has recently left us, and he shared words of wisdom even in our last moments, right? And then fast forward, when he sent his newsletter that he sent to everyone else, he sent a little postcard to me, and in that postcard, it was based upon a personal message that he wanted to share with me based upon our last conversation.
Wow.
So I will never forget the wisdom that I received from this incredible man and from John T. Scott. And John would always say, whatever you know, you pass it
Pass it
on.
on.
Yeah. So those are my words about mentorship.
And I'll add this, is I've been really lucky to mentor kids from Howard University. I've had like the last 3 of my interns have been from Howard. And one of them, Mars, did a fella left me, and she did a residency at RISD in Rhode Island. The second child went to the Phillips collection, Taryn. And third one now, she's gonna do whatever she wants to do. She's bad, And so, she graduates from Howard this year. So I've been really fortunate to kind of give back the same way that I got. Because I had so many people, like, me and them fight like cats and dogs, but over the last 25 years, it can really be a lonely world because nobody understands
It's a
what you're
solitary
going
sport.
through. And even like the comments about, I forgot who said it over here. People bring what they know into your work. You know, so it reminds me of this. You said so. You know, I'm like, not to me. I'm not thinking about none of that. You know, I'm just doing my work. But it is. I've been really blessed too by, you know, when Kevin have had some very similar experiences with some of the older guys. I've had people help me along the way and tell me, you know, I mean, you all know in your darkest moment when you think you stink, you know that, I mean, and it's not like something you can judge on if you sell something, whatever. I mean, I bet my life that nobody in here started doing this to get paid.
No.
You know, you know, I mean, we all have been doing this. I'm gonna tell you a bad story. When I was a little boy, I used to go around drawing swastikas at the bottom of my mama's thing. I was a little boy that could do it. I just liked the sign. And she was like, what's wrong with you? But I must have been 3, but I was low on the wall and I see the war stories and I like that sign. You know, I'd be right there and she was like, nah, bro. But it was that. It was making stuff out of nothing. It was doing something, drawing something. The craziest thing ever, somebody bought my work for the first time. I'm like, huh? You'll actually buy this? I mean, I did it because I do it for myself. I didn't care. You know, and when I say that September might throw a grenade in my I feel like this right here, this environment, this situation, this right here, y'all, this beautiful work, this is it for me. This is beautiful because, okay, trust, we all pros. Everybody here's an assassin. I'm sell all this stuff one day, you know. Yeah, so people buy my work, you know, they buy all our work. So whether it happens today, tomorrow, next week, 5 years from now, it's irrelevant. The fact is that you're growing, you know, and I say that's my thing, being inspired by everything I see here, from every one of y'all. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna take some of this with me.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like football coach. You work for somebody and they install their offense, you know, and do whatever. But it's a visual. The word I use in my process is journey. It's a journey. It's a winding roller coaster. You know, you're up, and you can't do it without community. Without somebody to say, yo, bro, you see what this fool wrote? Or, you know, I can't believe it. They like, you know, how did I miss this? You know, so it's a process. It's a process, you know, and so you definitely need this. This is invaluable for all of us. The give and take feedback and dialogue.
I teach at Clark Atlanta University. I am a professor in the art and fashion department there. So what's really good for me is that I get the young fashion students to come and do my sewing, do some additional sewing for me. I sew the initial piece and then they come in and sew the pouches I sew the pouches onto the surface and then they sew it onto the canvas so that it hangs that way, because that's the most tedious part of what I do. So it's great to have people that do that, and they also help with some of the painting. So I think it's really important to have those young people there and to share with them different things. I make sure that when they're there in the studio that they get to see the photographer come in. I said, now look over the photographer's shoulder. Look at what they're getting. Like, and they were like, well, why do I need to be there? I said, because this is going to be you one day. You know, so you need to understand that you need to get people to take the picture exactly the way you want them to take it. You need to understand, okay, when I took some to September Gray when we were hanging pieces. And I was like, you need to be here for the hang, because you need to see how this, you worked on it in the studio, but now you need to see how it's hung in a gallery. You need to have a conversation with a gallerist. You need to understand how this system works so that it's not new to you. And I have mentors that are around, maybe a little bit above me as far as the art world, that I go to and ask them questions, say, how do you handle this? And how do you handle this? And I don't really know if this is really happening the way I want it to happen. Because, you know, we don't do this alone. We all are part of a community, especially in this time. I find this to be the weirdest time. Like we lost Richard Hunt, and we lost Larry Walker, and we lost Radcliffe Bailey. Which hurt me to my core. Because Radcliffe I always called Radcliffe like a mystic. He would just always just show up like out of nowhere. Like I would be at I would be at an opening, and he would see I was doing well, and he would come up behind me and be like, "Hey man, it's looking pretty good. You know, you need to work on that part right there." And then you won't see him for another couple of months, or I may see him like at Art Basel, and like one day I helped him get to a private event, and he was downstairs waiting. I'm like, "Franklin, why are you downstairs waiting? You're supposed to be up there." He was like, I couldn't get in touch with the guy. So I went back upstairs, got in touch with the guy, and said, "Radcliffe's waiting downstairs." And he was like, "Tell him to come upstairs." So I got him back upstairs. Because the thing is like, these are people that like, I mean, Radcliffe to me he set it off in Atlanta, right? He's the reason why, like, you know of me is because of people like Radcliffe Bailey. So like, we don't get here by ourselves. We all have someone that preceded us. And that's why the first thing I started off with is a sense of gratitude.
Radcliffe's last show in Tennessee, I went to see it, and I didn't know. So one of the girls asked him, "How did you get involved in art?" He pointed at me, and I'm looking around like, "What?" He said, "My mother saw your picture in the newspaper and told me to give you a call." And when he called me, I pointed him to certain galleries and stuff. I had no idea until I heard that from his last show.
Mentorship for me, a good mentor is someone that helps you get past that self-doubt. And I can't speak for all artists, but sometimes I hit a brick wall.
Oh, yes.
We all do.
You know, and my mentor he would never tell me what to do. He would always suggest that you get into the studio and just work your way through that. And that's how I've learned to, you know, work through these situations where I don't know what to do with the canvas that I'm working on at the time. If I should even continue with it, put it to the side and start on something else. But my mentor would always encourage me to push through, never suggested where to put paint, how to put it on, but work through your self-doubt by getting into the studio and working. And that's for me worked. And that's the only way I can work through my self-doubt of hitting a brick wall. Because there have been times when
Who was your mentor?
I thought I was not good enough, you know.
Who was the mentor?
Larry Walker.
I have a sofa in my studio, and I take naps. I take a nap, and I get up and I go, "Oh, that's what I should have done."
I got 3 studios on 4 acres of land. Each one of them got a TV in it.
Right.
Each one got that because I had to watch the game.
Yeah.
I listen to jazz. Each one of the studios do.
But for mentorship for me, I was lucky enough when I started my career. I did like the festivals. I traveled through the whole country doing the African American festivals, Harlem Arts festivals. Got a chance to meet a lot of great artists. Really blessed. Annie Lee from Chicago. She gave me my first show I did, the Harlem Fine Arts show at the Armory. She said, "You have a future in art." And I was like, I don't know what you said. I don't have enough money to get back home. I was blessed to have like Gilbert Young coming through my studio, Kevin A. Williams, Andre Thompson. Brothers really took an interest in me and unselfishly gave me everything that they knew. You know, and I appreciate it because it saved me so much time and money. Frustration in the art business because it can be cruel.
Ooh.
Everybody, I saw 100 artists start with me. There's only like 5 of us left still doing it. You know, It's a hard path. You gotta respect those who choose this path. Everybody up here is intelligent. They can do anything they probably want to. The artist can do everything. It's the way their mind works. They put things together. So if we choose to do art, you know, we choose this hard path. You know, a mentor saves you those hard headaches on this journey. Kevin Cole as well. Kevin's very honest as well.
Yes.
You're
Too honest.
Sometimes a little too brute. But, Gilbert Young came to my studio and I used to sign my signature really wild with a black and a white paint marker. He was like, man, it's like you signing that stuff with toothpaste. It was a beautiful painting, but I had this big old ugly signature on it. He was like, man, that. So the bigger the signature, the smaller the artist. And those,
But you know, one of the things that we face as artists, I remember being in grad school, there were over 300 graduate students in there. And this professor came in, he said, only 2 of you gonna be artists.
Right.
He said, all of you women are gonna have kids, you're gonna drop out and never paint again. All of you minorities, what you're gonna do, you're going to say how racist the system is and how bad it is, and the rest of you are gonna be artists. I wrote a letter to the dean, and I was so mad. But you know what? 10 years later, he was right. But it was me and this Hispanic girl. So when I got my contract for the Olympics, I sent it to him and said, thank you, Jesus. But that's the system is.
The mentorship, I want to expand on that. It's so important to mentor, because you're an inspiration whether you know it or not. People come in and they see, whether they're old or young, they're looking at your work, they're looking at you and seeing you do this thing, which they know is not easy. So you're inspiring people whether you want to or not. When people come in the gallery and see this work, they're inspired. And then they'll always ask, which is interesting, especially if it's not figurative, well, September, are these black artists? I'm like, yeah, really? I'm like, yeah, they are. So they're just really wowed by the work. And then they're like, well, you own the gallery? Yes. Wow, you're a black gallery. So, you know, you're mentoring and being an inspiration whether you want to or not. So it's important that they see what you're doing, that you take them in, if you can, and spend time with them, and just nourish them along this journey, because it is a journey in the art world. It is a continuous
And
journey.
September's a coach, boy. She's a coach. She'll call me up sometimes. Now, Jamel, I need you to get this piece over here. I said, September, you know I got the work. Just come by the gallery at the studio and you can get whatever you want. She goes, okay. What are you working on now, Jamel? Oh, I'm working on this. And she goes, well, you can do it. I know you can do it, Jamel. You all are so good. She probably says the same thing to all of us. That I
will tell you if I don't like the work,
Right.
yes, or if
Right.
I feel like, okay, I know you can do better, that's okay, but no, that's not it, But you keep working.
But
Yeah, I see.
she's bold enough to even come back years later and be like, you know what, I didn't get it the first time, but now I get it. Yeah, bring that by the studio now. Bring that over by the gallery now. So she's
a journey.
she's a mentor as well.
It's a journey.
She's a mentor as well.
It's a beautiful journey. So now I want to open up the floor to questions from the audience, because I'm sure some of you have some questions for these amazing artists.
Don't be trying to start no fights now. You already see we ready.
I don't have a question, more of a comment. Just sitting in the audience is inspiring. You know, I'm in the culinary world, so a lot of the things that you talk about are transferable in what we do. And I appreciate you talking about it openly. So thank you.
Modest. He's a master chef.
Thank you.
He's a
What's the
master
restaurant?
chef.
You know, I'm not here to promote. It's okay. No, that's okay.
Because I'm hungry.
I did not say that.
No. It's okay. Thank you. I'm not going to share,
please.
but no, it's okay. It's okay. No. Well, you know, I'm in transition, so that's why it's a little complicated to explain. But I spent 34 years with Lettuce Entertaining. We opened concepts across the country. So, but currently, right now, I'm in a project that I'm doing, and you know, what's interesting to hear is like one of the things you said. You know, I'm in that space right now where I'm trying to define my next step in food. Right. I spent a lot of years training European cuisine. And I'm trying to lean into, you know, the African American diaspora in my expression. And I'm a little timid about what that looks like. So hearing some of these comments about that really was inspiring to me, and I appreciate that, and I do. Okay. But I'll leave you with this card.
I also want to give a shout out to Marcy Rubin, who's sitting here in the front. She's
Yes.
the curator for this
yes.
building.
You did a phenomenal
But you didn't come up in time for us to give you a shout out last night, so
Yes, because would not have been hung this way if I had hung it.
Right.
You did a phenomenal job.
This show was
Thank
amazing
you.
to hang, and I'm so excited that I get to spend the next 2 months with all of this artwork. So, yeah. Thank you all for contributing and sharing your vision.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Questions?
You can, no questions, you can always talk to the artists individually. or-
Yes, and I
You'll
know
spend
we
some
thank
time
you.
with
This
them.
was 4 o'clock, so we didn't keep you too long. So please enjoy the work. We're here. The work is for sale.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please feel comfortable. Just
Yeah,
let us know what you
Because they don't care about money.
And we got magazines in the back too, yeah.
But I want to say thank you again.
You guys are like a college education and art, I love it, I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Whew.
Pleasure.